not sure, Matt, I would agree to the word new word. In that sense, I would rather look at it as a dynamic and constantly evolving word. I mean, it's the time of the year as well that we are reflecting and we're reassessing what we have learned and what were the lessons from this year and what changes we need to bring about for the leaders. But then again, I mean, if we look at the constantly changing environment, perhaps specifically in this part of the world, the pace of change has been much faster than in the 80s and 90s, but there has always been new muscles that we have to build along the way. And therefore, my view is that this word, whatever we're assuming to be the post-2020 word, it's going to call for pretty much the same traits for a leader as in the pre-2020. These are fundamentals that we need to live with and also to lead successfully. I mean, if I can relate that to my personal experience with the Middle East, obviously over the last 13 years, there has been so many growth opportunities, and we have really enjoyed the success of growing HVS in this part of the world. But perhaps it's also reflecting back and realizing that over the last 13 years, there were so many different markets that for whatever reasons, whether it is we couldn't reach them by travel or they became dormant, that suddenly I lost these businesses and I had to replace that. And what that required is being ready, being adaptable, and also being able to actually identify within a quick time frame, how do we deal with challenges? So historically, if I look back and assess, no matter how harsh these events have been, whether it is, when we talk about economic collapse, when we talk about war, terrorism events, especially as it impacts the hospitality industry, human resilience has always been able to rise above these challenges. And for me, it's just another challenge. My only concern is to try to define the new word. It's as if it's there to stay. And my message, there's nothing there to stay. In the corporate sense, also when we look at companies, so many companies that were very well established have failed. And the new disruptors, that buzzword, they have actually made way. And this is what's going to happen again today, that we have new disruptors that will shape the future. But the underlying, again, for me, factor for failure, ironically, has always been the success. And what I'm trying to say, that success is not final. And therefore, when we fail is because we're not evolving. So more so perhaps now, we just have to be ready. We have to be ready. We have to make sure, I think I would really boil it down to three verticals that I personally believe are extremely important for leadership in general. In the old days, but more so also in the future, is your corporate values as a company, how strong they are. And that relates to innovation, that relates to readiness, investment into R&D to really understand where the future is headed. Dynamic strategy is probably a very important one, because we used to forecast by the year. Now we have to forecast by the month as it happens. It cannot be more dynamic. So these strategy, yes, while you have an overall strategy, needs to remain dynamic, and we just have to be ready and adaptable to any conditions, which then ties into the second vertical, which is our people. Who are we hiring? How aligned they are with us? How we're creating those sort of sense of ownership to become our partners and to be able really to react and be quick in how they react. And finally, as a leader, to actually enjoy the success, but be prepared to the next challenge to really rise up to it. It's definitely not an easy task in the current climate, as I'm sure Matt, you would agree, and many others. It has been very tough for people, not just professionally, but even on a personal level. And it's quite complex. I don't want to, today perhaps I look back and I say, with the office meeting that we had yesterday, the morale was high. Everyone was excited about what we achieved despite this challenging time. But that wasn't easy. I mean, the first couple of days, or perhaps the first week, I would describe, everyone was shocked. There was a denial. But more importantly, I think, is what we did, which again, for me, has really proven to pull us together, make us stronger by the end of the year and then going into next year. And they are, I mean, what I would describe just the basics of what I think are extremely important to be able to lead and manage. As I said earlier on, the corporate values are extremely important. I mean, you can be a successful leader. You work for the wrong company, you cannot lead. Your team has to be also very aligned, because you're going to count on them to support you, and then you would lead. So My personal view at the start of this crisis is to take a longer term view. I mean, obviously, with the hope that things will resolve in a week or two, or perhaps a month or two. Back in April, no one thought that here comes December. We are still trying to figure out what's happening. There's very little certainty or uncertainty when compared to back then. Personally, it was a 12 months plan for me. How do we keep our heads above water for 12 months, which is good enough because that also allows the team to sense that commitment that I had for them for 12 months. Communication and transparency, even though within 6 hours everyone was remotely working back at home, but that continuous communication, acknowledging that we have a problem. I mean, it's a fine line between the leader being positive and engaging, but also it takes courage to say we have a problem. And by the looks of it, it's going to be a very tough one. So how do we work together to actually find solutions, to collaborate? What do we need to do? And that is what I probably would say was the most important and will always be the most important in the success of leading and engaging, is the sense of ownership that your team will have, that they feel they're responsible for both the success and the failure. And this has really proved to be extremely positive for us. And the last one was that even though we are struggling, and we did struggle, I actually went out and hired people, identifying the new services that we may have to start to replace some of the lost business. It's that, again, the strategic plan versus what we can afford to do today. It's a combination. And as I just told you, Matt, yesterday we were assessing it. It was our last office meeting for the 2020. We did say it was painful, because it was painful, but we also acknowledged the fact that we are definitely stronger today together. We've created a stronger bond, and we are ready to rise to that challenge. And we're not saying 21 is not going to be challenging. If it wasn't, that's great, we're ready. But then we're just continuing to be ready that this is just another challenge that we're going to have to be, and we're going to have to be open-minded, and we're going to have to build probably more muscles, but we will succeed. And that's what human being generally does. We will always rise to succeed.